I'm Amy Shollenberger, as was mentioned, and I own a consulting firm called ActionCircles. We do political strategy for issues and people. And one of the things we do with our clients is we help folks like you get directly engaged with efforts like the carbon pollution tax, to talk to their legislators directly, either in the State House or out in the world. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the in-district meeting, and this is really just meant to be a teaser. I think y'all are going to a more in-depth workshop after this where you're going to get the nitty-gritty, here's what you actually say, and all of that kind of stuff. This is more of a top-level overview. And before I dive in, I just do want to recognize there are a couple legislators in the room with us, two awesome Marys in the back. Mary Sullivan. Legislators, I didn't miss anybody, did I? So I think they're going to be on a panel next, so they may tell you differently than what I'm about to tell you, and you should listen to them for sure. So the first thing I always say, well, first let me ask, how many of you have met with your legislator outside of the State House? Good, so about half. How many of you have met with a legislator inside the State House? A few less. Okay, great. How many of you are really looking forward to having your in-district meeting? Oh my goodness, so few hands. Okay, well, by the end of this, I'm going to ask that question again. I'm hoping more of you will be excited about it. I always start these little talks so I've been doing this work, doing lobbying work, doing organizing work, being an activist for 18 years, and the thing that really keeps me going in this work is the basic humanity of it. It really amazes me every day working with policymakers to just interact with them as human beings. And it sounds ridiculous, but I always tell folks that I'm working with, if you don't remember anything else, remember this: legislators are human beings just like you. So all the stuff that you carry around with you, your insecurity, your excitement, your enthusiasm, your hunger, your morning crankiness, your amazement at the sunset, they have all that too. They have grandkids, they have dogs, they have cats, they have jobs. And sometimes I think it's hard for people to remember when they're meeting with a legislator that in addition to doing this really important job, which suddenly seems even more important, as Lieutenant Governor-elect Zuckerman pointed out, in these times, this job of being a Vermont legislator seems even more important. In addition to carrying that responsibility, they also have all the same stuff that you have going on in their lives. And I always encourage folks to try to remember that, because sometimes they seem a little distracted, or maybe they seem like they're not really thinking that your issue that you're talking to them about might not be the most important thing in their life right now, right? And sometimes people can take offense at that. And I think it's just good to remember, they could be your top champion and they might still be distracted by something that's going on outside of this meeting. And I think that's especially true when you're meeting in the district, because especially if you're meeting during the legislative session, because one of the things that happens during the legislative session, of course, is the legislators are in the State House Tuesday through Friday, long hours. I usually get in the building around 8:30, and many legislators have been there already for an hour or more. I usually leave the State House around 6:30, and many legislators either go to dinner and go back to the State House, or they stay there after that time to do their work. And so then they go home Friday night, and they have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to cram in all the stuff that they have to do, that, their job, their family, meeting with their constituents. And so really just keeping that in mind is very helpful. So on the sheet, I have some top tips for working with legislators. And I'm just going to run through them. And none of these things should be amazingly new information to you, right? This is just kind of like tips for interacting with other human beings. So it's not like, whoa, this is crazy new information. It can all seem familiar to you, but it's good to kind of just keep it in mind when you're getting ready to meet with somebody, because sometimes it's hard to remember. You know, you guys are all, you're here because you're super passionate about climate action. And sometimes when you're super passionate about things, it's hard to remember, you know, just basic human interaction skills. So that's why we do the top tips. So the first thing is make an appointment, because your legislators are busy. Chances are your appointment's going to be on a Monday if it's during the legislative session. And remember, they're doing a lot of things on that Monday, so try to be really clear about how long it's going to take and meet somewhere where it's convenient for them. The picture, if you had seen it, was just, actually I stole it. It wasn't even my picture. I stole it from the Migrant Justice Facebook page, so you could go there and look at it if you want to. They did a lot of in-district meetings when they were working on getting driving privileges for the migrant workers in the state. And it was just this really casual meeting, sitting around a table, people talking with their legislator, and that's what it should look like. It could be in a coffee shop, it could be in a local restaurant, it could be at somebody's house. It doesn't have to be a formal setting. But just keep in mind that they're going to have a lot of other things going on, so make your meeting, the next one is be prepared, right? Know what you're going to say, know who's going to say it if you have a few people coming to the meeting. Talk to each other ahead of time so you're organized and you're not trying to figure out at the meeting, oh, were you going to say that, or was I going to say that? Work yourself out an agenda. And it's also helpful to have a takeaway piece for the legislator, so you don't have to remember everything you said or frantically take notes while you're talking. You can also, of course, follow up with email afterwards. The other thing you want to, that falls into being prepared, there's a couple other things. One is, and I think y'all have had some workshops on this today too, figure out what's your story about your issue, right? Why is a carbon pollution tax, or putting a price on carbon, why is that important to you? Not necessarily why is it important in the world, or why is it the morally right thing to do, but why did you go to all the trouble of asking for this meeting and coming to the meeting to talk with the legislator? It's unusual for people to do that, not everyone does that. So the legislator's going to want to know, what is it that's motivating you? And if you work on your story, I think, who went to the story workshop, or is it coming up in the afternoon? So work on that story, because one thing that I've noticed when people talk to legislators and they're really passionate about something and they tell them all the data that goes with the issue, the legislator might say, oh, I met with so-and-so and they talked a lot about carbon pollution. But when someone meets with a legislator and they tell them a story that is personal and is about their passion, the legislator will often repeat the story, right? They'll say, oh, I met with so-and-so, and I can't believe how excited they were about thus and such, and they told me this story about their grandkid or whatever it was, and that's what helps to create excitement in the State House for your issue, is people talking to each other about the issue and about their constituents. Because a lot of times when one legislator says to another, oh, I met with Frank and he told me this great story, then the other legislator says, oh my God, I met with Sue and she told me this great story. And then all of a sudden you have two people talking to each other about your issue. So those stories are really important. The other thing you want to do to prepare is practice staying calm. Okay, this is going to be good practice in general for the next 4 years at least. Right? So you all are passionate about your issue, and I have noticed in my life when I'm talking to people who are passionate about an issue, sometimes I might just ask them a question. I might not even be disagreeing with them. I might just ask a question. And all of a sudden they're down my throat. Well, how can you even think that? Or why did you ask me that question? And that's not helpful. It's not helpful. And sometimes when you're meeting with a legislator, they're actually asking you questions that sound like they're disagreeing with you because they know they're going to have to talk to their colleagues who are going to disagree with them. And so they're trying to find out, what's the answer to this question? And it's often like this totally with you attitude. Like, I really want to know the answer to this question so I can repeat it later when so-and-so asks me this question, and they're usually thinking about a specific colleague, and they're usually asking the question in the way that colleague would ask it. And so it's really important for you when you're meeting with your legislators to stay calm and to tell them the answer, if you know it. And don't assume they're not with you. Don't assume anything, right? If you're not sure what's going on, ask them. Oh, why are you asking me that question? I'm curious. Is it that are you thinking about supporting us and you want to know what the other side is saying? Or do you really have a question? How can I best answer this question for you? So there's a couple little things you can do to make sure that you stay calm in your meeting. One is you can practice ahead of time if you think you might get upset. So one thing I always say is when you're practicing, talking points or practicing a speech, and you're worried that you're going to sound angry, find yourself a dog or a teenager. Sit them down in front of you, and practice your speech. If they're still sitting there when you're done, the tone's just right. If they're either reacting to what you're saying in sort of a negative way, the dog might cry or run away or lie down or show you his belly, then you know your tone's not quite right? The teenager is likely to speak out, so they're often a more instant check. But I find if you can give your talking points to a dog or a teenager, and they give you this positive feedback coming back, then you know your tone is good. So if you have concerns with your tone, practice that. Don't practice on your spouse, because your spouse is always way more sensitive, right? Or they already know that, oh, when he does that, this is what it means, or when she does that, this is what it means. So get somebody neutral out there who can give you some good feedback. The other thing is, there's a little thing I learned, a little tip, when you're in a meeting and you feel yourself getting riled up, and you think, oh God, here it goes, and your head starts spinning, and you think, oh my God, this person they don't get it, they're gonna argue with me. All you have to do is curl your toes as hard as you can. They can't see it happening, and then take a deep breath, and then come back into the conversation. You can try it right now, I don't even know you're doing it. What that does is it gets you out of your head for 2 seconds, and it helps it helps your body to calm down, so your heart rate will come down a little bit. If you take the deep breath, you can even smile. If you practice ahead of time, you can smile. And then you can get back into the conversation without being aggressive or argumentative. And it really helps just to take that little 2-second time out because you have to know yourself. You have to know, oh, I'm starting to get upset or defensive, and I don't want to be like that in this meeting, because this is too important to do that, right? So that's part of being prepared. Being helpful, so right here in Vermont, we are so lucky because we have such direct relationships with our legislators. They are not lucky because they don't have staff. And so if you become someone who can be a resource to a legislator, that can really be important for you and for your issue, because they will know, if a legislator knows you're going to give them accurate information when they ask for it, they'll call you and ask for it. They'll email you and ask for it. And so try to work yourself into being that resource. If you're in your meeting and they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know the answer, but you know what? I'll get back to you. If you need help, contact one of the folks running this show here today. They'll help you figure out how to get the answer, and then make sure you do follow up and get them the information. I don't know what that noise was. Oh, that was The other one is, the next thing is stay on message. So, as I said, legislators are busy people. They're going to be distracted. They're going to be excited to see you. You're a constituent. They're home. They're in their district. You're going to talk about the weather. You're going to talk about the potholes. You're going to talk about all kinds of things. But remember, you only have a certain amount of time for your meeting, and they probably have somewhere else to go after your meeting. So it's your job to make sure you're moving through the meeting. And one thing you can do is practice your pivots. And a pivot is just a simple way to get a meeting back on track, to get a conversation back on track. So here's some examples. So blah, 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 you're talking about the pollution tax, and the legislator says something that is relevant, but it's not directly what you want to talk about. You can say something like, I see your point. The way I look at it is this. And then you just come back to what you want to talk about. Or maybe they're sort of getting off on a tangent, and they're making a good point, but it's not really directly relevant to what the issue that you're trying to talk about. So you could say something like, oh yeah, I see why you're thinking about that, but the important thing to remember is this, and then come back to the points that you're trying to make. So you can practice, you can come up with your own little phrases to say and practice saying them. This is a great thing to practice with your friends. Pretend you're in a meeting, get them to say something a little bit off topic, and then see if you can bring it back. And the two last ones, again, these are obvious, but I think it's important to say them out loud. First one is be respectful. So again, especially in these times that we're in, I think it's really important for us, especially here in Vermont, where we have this awesome culture of civility, to keep it strong. And so really try to be respectful in the meeting, even if people are disagreeing with you, and also being respectful of their time, and also being respectful of the way people make decisions, right? You might have known the moment someone said to you, we need to put a price on carbon. Chances are you said, oh my God, why didn't I think of that sooner? Of course we have to put a price on carbon. Not everyone is going to be that quick with the ability to make a decision, and especially policymakers who know they're going to have to go in there and talk to their colleagues, and there's going to have to be a vote, and there's going to be a long discussion, and they have to get reelected, and all these many things that come into play. Sometimes it takes a long time for somebody to make a decision about their position. And if you can be respectful of that process and give your legislator time and space to make it, you might actually get a better result. One thing I really like to say to a legislator, and I'll tell you what, it amazes me every time. I often ask, what do you need from me to make your decision? Or what do you need from me to support my client's position? 9 times out of 10, they will answer that question with a very specific answer. I need the answer to this question. I need to know this is true. I need to know this person who's a constituent of mine is okay with this. I need to figure out how this is going to play out for this constituency group. And if you can help them get whatever it is that they need, a lot of times they'll support your position. So that's a little trick, is just ask them, how are you going to make this decision? And then, of course, the last one is to say thank you, right? I can't tell you how many times I see people yelling at legislators like all year long, like they get yelled at all the time. You didn't do this, or you didn't support this position, or you didn't vote it the wrong way, or oh my God, I can't believe this. But there are very few times they get thanked, right? So day in, day out, legislators are voting on pieces of legislation. They're doing exactly what their constituents ask them to do, and nobody's recognizing that. And if you say thank you, they will notice that. And it's also a good thing to do. Like, it's really important to recognize the hard work that they're doing in the legislature. And also just say thank you for the time. Thanks for meeting with us, right? Thanks for taking that time out of your busy Monday. And I always say, when you're saying thank you, just say thank you, right? Don't say thank you. And by the way, I expect you to be voting this way on the bill when it comes in front of you, right? Just say thanks. And then later, Send a different note that says, I hope you're gonna support the bill, right? Appreciate people for what they're offering and be respectful of that. And I'll tell you what, legislators do notice that. Many times I'm in the building and the legislator gets a thank you note, and they'll actually walk around and show it to people. Like, it's a big deal because it's so rare and it's so sad that it's such a big deal for them. They should, I think legislators should get thank you notes and be like, oh, another thank you note, throw it in the recycling bin. Right? That's the situation that should be true, but it's not. So really think about that and think about making sure you follow up your meeting with that note. I'm happy to take questions. I don't know how much time we have left. None? Fine.